Hey there! All right, listen up. I'm going to talk about Ellanz, and that is, by the way, that is my fantasy sci-fi role-playing setting. And okay, so here's the story. Since I was 13 years old in 1982, I started saving my papers for my role-playing games. I've lost a lot of it, but I've kept a lot of it too. The stack is about 18 inches high. And I look back and I'm like, oh, not every 13-year-old hand wrote basically 5 novels of material for fantasy role-playing. And of course it was just the things I wrote for my own settings and you know, the adventures I was just putting my friends through. So it wasn't like I was like, oh, I'm going to create this publication, I wrote the whole thing, and then maybe some other people use it. No. It was my friends were getting together and I was just writing things for them. And that's all I did in school, by the way. When I was in high school, 84 to 87, 4, 5, 6, yeah, that's right. It was, my grade point average in my freshman year was 3.6. My grade point average in the next year, my sophomore year, was 2.6, and then it was 1.6, and then my grade point average in my senior year was 0.6. I don't know how I graduated. They like in the 80s, everyone was fast and loose. Probably half the teachers were high, and they were just like, all right, you did a good job, see you later. And of course, my senior year, I was emancipated and living on my own and had a job and everything. So, and by the way, I'm not talking to you younger generations and saying your life should be that way. However you're doing it is fine. Just do whatever seems good to you. And yeah, I'm not one of those people like, oh, you whippersnapper, why can't you do it my way? It's like, well, you know, I would have, I mean, that was just my I was just sort of thrown into those circumstances. All right, so anyway, so I kept all this stuff, and recently I organized it, labeled it, dated it, did all these things. And, you know, I have it sealed up. And so I realized, I was like, wow, this is like 3 years ago. I was like, wow, what a trip. Since I was 13 years old, now 50, I have never been without this box full of my role-playing stuff. I carried it around everywhere I went. And just accumulate, like you can literally see, like when I got a word processor in college, you know, then it was all typed, and you know, oh, and the word processors in '93, you had to, oh, you won't even believe this. I had a Brother word processor. You had to buy cartridges of the ink, not the ink. It was a band that went through, and every time it pecked a thing, it would go over and you just ruin the spool, and you kept having to buy the spools. And that's, of course, you know, the old printer cartridge thing where they make you keep paying for it forever and forever. And I think the end of that, and that's an industry I'd love to see the end of. Let's see here. Yeah, I got time left. So anyway, yeah, I'm going to talk about Ellanz. So Ellanz comes from probably 1984, 1985. I made this map of this fantasy world, and I called it E-L-L-A-N-Z, Ellanz. It says it in like script. And by the way, I'm a calligrapher too. So even when I was very young, I had like this amazing handwriting, and I just did all these maps and stuff like that. So that's Ellanz, and in 2020, November of 2020, I was scrolling, and I realized I had spent 2.5 hours just scrolling. Wasting my life. I was like, you know what? I could be writing my book, because I wanted to write my own setting. And I did it, guys. I wrote over 3 years, I wrote a 400-page, 160,000 word, that's 2 novels, by the way, player guide, or player handbook, and it's done. It looks great. It's ready for alpha testing. So that's an accomplishment. I put this on my Facebook feed. It's weird. I put it on my Facebook feed, this huge accomplishment. I have like some screenshots of it. And it was like 9 likes. Not that I care, but I was like, If I just put a face of me, like, hey, look at my beautiful face, it's like, ah, we love it. And I'm just like, God, guys, can't you be happy for me? I accomplished something. So anyway, we're about to start alpha testing, which is basically me and my group. And then soon thereafter, I don't have it set up yet, I'm going to set up one other playtest group. And we're about to get started. We're making their characters. So first off, in Ellanz, there's no character sheet, at least not yet. But it uses the cut and paste method. Because how it works is you get powers. So you just go down and you just copy and paste, copy the power, and you just put it on another sheet and you print that out, and that's your character. You just sort of pick the things from the list that you wanted, and that makes up what is your character. So it has, what is it? So you get attributes, which is like D&D. It's those 6. It's all so familiar. If you're familiar with 5th edition D&D, this follows the same thing. And as it turns out, if I'm not mistaken, you can't copyright rules, but you can copyright specific, writing thing. That's how Pathfinder has created its own thing from whole cloth that belongs to them. Because they didn't just copy it, and they didn't even make a closed copy, they made their own thing. So, but because if there's difficulty classes or whatever, none of that matters. You can't copyright like a rules system. So anyway, back to the main thread, you've got that method of character creation. So you have your attributes, I have skills, and then of course, other than that, you have just the powers. You have like 700 powers in there. You just pick, and that's how you get your class. And for like class and race, the old traditional thing, the old school class race thing. So with race, it just has certain powers, and you don't even have to take those powers. You could just say, and in fact, you don't even have to have a race at all. You can just make up your own thing. Or be a human, but don't take those human powers. Just pick from the common powers. And so that's character generation. You get, and it's point-based, so you get, you get 350 points at first level, and then, got a little tickle. And then at second level, when you hit second level, you get 50 more points. And the most you can spend on a power is 10% of your points. So when you're making your character, you can only spend 35 points on any given power. But inside the powers, because I'm like, oh, there's 700 powers. But guess what? A lot of them have subgroups. Like basically you can take that power as a seed and you can grow it by adding things to it, adding like a +1 or whatever it is, or different aspects of it. So you can grow those according to the 10% limit as you go up. And then of course when you hit 6th level, that's the first time that you get plus 100 points. And the levels only go 1 to 10, but it actually scales. A first level Ellanzian character is actually basically 5th level. So when you start a role-playing game and you're like, I'm first level, I could die for anything. We skip that whole thing. That doesn't even exist. So character generation, it's very important. Like you don't grow, like in Pathfinder, you grow very straight in a pillar. And you can't have too much deviation. You can't. You know what? I almost faulted Pathfinder for not having enough variation. I strike that from the record. That is simply not true. But in terms of the numbers, it goes up. By the time you're 20th level, you're like plus 40 to hit or whatever. And the system that I made, it doesn't work like that. Your character doesn't grow up so much as they grow out. Like your existing skills get better, you add skill, you become more fleshed out, more, what's the word I'm looking for, like flexible. You've got different options of things to do and you become more interesting. You can handle a variety of things. And that's how I'm writing the first adventure. Like the first adventure is not just go in and just be like, oh, I have a sword, damage, damage, damage. It's textured. There's a variety of different challenges. So as a party, you can't go in and just not have thought about, how the party works together and how you could handle a vast variety of different, things. So for example, Warhammer Fantasy is like the least flexible of these things. So in Warhammer Fantasy, some things deal fire damage and some things make you immune to fire. And that's it. That was all they could come up with. And in Pathfinder, which I love, there's different damage types. Of course, this exists in 5th edition as well. Acid, fire, not electricity, they call it lightning damage, thunder damage. So in mine, I have a whole bunch, I have like 12 different damage types. So what I've done is, I didn't create a system that was more complex just to make it more complex. I made a system that's very muscular, and it has a lot of economies in it. So when you're dealing with different threats, you have to take into account that there's these different things that can happen. You can't just have, we have heat and cold resistance. And of course, in Dungeons & Dragons, as it's grown, fire is the most common damage type. Then you have cold, and then, and then the other ones on down to where, like, sonic immunity doesn't really help you that much because it just never happens in the game. And this has to do not only with the game system, but internally, which is in the player handbook, but it has to do with the adventures that I'm going to write, which is, well, what sort of challenges are in these adventures? Well, I want there to be a lot of them. I don't want there to be useless skills. I don't want there to be damage types that you can just ignore them. And so things that are flexible come at a premium because those help a lot more. And as I'm writing my Monster Man, yeah, this all ties in, guys. And it's great. My system, what I've written, is as good as, if not better than, anything out there in the market. And I've seen a lot. I've read a lot of rule books. I've seen it all. And I gotta tell you, it's really good. And the only flaw, I'd say, lay in the fact that I constructed something that if somebody was playing Dungeons & Dragons, that they would immediately be able to be familiar with what it is that I was doing. So I couldn't do roll multiple dice and get successes, which I freaking love. I absolutely love it. But I got some other mechanics in there. So someone who is really good at Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, they know everything, they'll be able to read literally, I just have not even a full page, like, this is how you switch over. And because a lot of the mechanics are so familiar, but I took those basic mechanics, I expanded them out in a logical progression, and I made something that was good for someone who was already an expert at 5th edition. And so in a way, I made it for my own group, because I've run several groups, and in recent years, and guys, they're just good at it. They've already done it all. They're I'm going to make an Oath of whatever paladin. And I'm just like, all right, well, here you go. But with what I've created, I mean, it's great. And that's what I want. What I'm really trying to do is capture that magic. That magic I had in 1982 with my little Fiend folio in my backpack in the park, where I was just reading it and like just absorbing this creativity and thinking about how I was going to put these monsters in my own adventure. And they were all so good, and I just like, and there were some of them I was like scared of. Like, I had nightmares of the Penanggalan, that's how you say it, from the Fiend folio, and I just like, I was like, it's coming to get me. It's scratching at the window. That magic, and I guarantee you, with my monster manual, you will get that feeling and that inspiration again, because I'm telling you guys, when I'm writing this stuff, a geyser of creativity, of ideas is just coming out of my head. And it's all human-made. I didn't go to ChatGPT and be like, write me a fantasy setting, make it 400 pages. And in fact, I don't think AIs could do that. Really make a system that was cohesive. And so there's a lot of human energy that's gone into it, and I'm very excited for it. Now, yeah, so my monster manual is amazing, because what I'm doing is I'm trying to catch that sort of nostalgia of, not nostalgia like in, what's that called, in like a cold-hearted sort of way, you know, like everyone's cashing in on 80s nostalgia, and it's just like, oh, there's a word for it. It's like that it's so corporate, it's so, soulless. Yeah, a soulless cash grab, trying to get all those people. Like when I saw a Darth Vader sticker on a banana, I was like, well, that's it for Star Wars for me, because in the early 80s, we were scared of Darth. Who was that guy? What did he look like under that mask? And so, like, when you heard that, it was like, oh yeah, it was great. And those times shall never come again. All right, so anyway, when you read my monster manual, and because I've taken those classic monsters and I've added like 80% creativity to them. So typically my monster entries, they're not a quarter page. They're not even a page, like the current one. I write typically 2 to 6 pages on each monster. So my monster manual is going to be insane, guys. It's going to be nuts. There's going to be so much. I think it's going to be 700 pages. It's going to be crazy. And of course, harkening back to Games Workshop, yeah, I got like a minute and a half, to Games Workshop, where I'm like, hey, why can't you guys get your rules all in one place for people to see it? And, you know, and then you put out a supplement. Now we got to own that, cross-reference it, understand. So I'm going to put my money where my mouth is, and I'm going to create something where you can access it and just have, so if I add a new monster, it's just going to be shuffled in, and at the top there'll be like a little, you know, updates. Check the L section for new lurker beneath, or whatever it is. And so it's really cool. Like the original monster manual had like 4 different types of giant beetles, and I'm rocking 12. I mean, not to brag, Gary Gygax is obviously a genius and a creativity geyser, but now I did it. I understand it for myself, because I wrote a 400-page, 160,000-word thing, and by the way, that's not even enough. Like, for the rules, it's easy to understand the rules. Like, once you understand the rule set, which is really straightforward, then you can, all the powers are just like, it's kind of like magic cards. Like, each of the powers like changes it or does something with these core mechanics that are amazing. Like, my conditions are just awesome, and they tie into the game. That's probably the hardest thing to learn, is the conditions. I have like 14 conditions, and each one has like levels. They go 1 through 6. So if you get a condition and then you get it again and again and again and again, it just adds up to it. And you gotta watch. That's one of the economies that around which you need to strategize as a playing group. Like, I'm not writing these adventures for beginners. It's not like softball. Guys, this is hardball, and it's a lot of fun. It's meant to go fast, to be super engaging. It's designed for someone that already knows how to role play, has already been playing for a while, and I hope it doesn't come off as gatekeepy, because of course a new person could learn this system, but it's erudite. And of course people learned advanced Dungeons & Dragons when it first came out in the late 70s. That Dungeon Master's Guide, that is not simple. But, you know, people made it simple. They could just role play around things and ignore things that they didn't want. All right, well, that's all I got to say about Ellanz. I've definitely given you a couple good rambles today, guys. Thanks a lot.